I'm Dave Gray. I'm an artist and an entrepreneur. I started my company in 1993, and I've been operating that company almost continuously for more than 20 years, from startup to where it is today. It's a multi-million-dollar company. I guess I'm kind of an accidental entrepreneur in the sense that I never thought, I wasn't one of those kids who was walking around door to door selling. Like one of my business partners, when he was a kid, he painted rocks and walked around the neighborhood selling painted rocks to neighbors, and he's just been an entrepreneur his whole life. But that's not me. I was one of those people who became an entrepreneur because I had to. I went to art school. I got out of art school. I went into the newspaper business doing infographics, information design, visual explanations, and I fell in love with the work, but I realized that newspapers were kind of a dying industry, and so I had to find a way to rescue this visual explanation discipline that I had fallen in love with. So I decided to take it out of the newspaper, the idea of visual explanations, and bring it into the business world. Before I started my own company, but very shortly before, I sat down and I was having a coffee with the guy, and he said, "Dave, there are people walking around with smiles on their faces every day. There are people in this world that are walking around with smiles on their faces every day. Do you want to be one of those people?" And I said, yeah, I want to be. Yes. Yes, thank you. I do want to be one of those people. And turns out those people are called entrepreneurs. They're people who are, in my view, artists. The first job of any creative person is to create your life. And I think that's what entrepreneurs are doing. They're changing the world, and we hear a lot about disruption and changing the world and innovation, but really a big part of what they're doing is creating their life. They're forging a way to create a life that is a life of meaning for them, and meaning and purpose. And I think there's lots of lessons in there for education and kids. We're still teaching kids how to find. We're still teaching kids in school this idea of they should be learning so they can find a job, and I think that we need to be teaching kids. We need to turn that around and start teaching kids how to create a customer instead of find a job. That's the way you become an entrepreneur. You don't become an entrepreneur by finding a job. Like a job is just out there. It's something that, and most of those jobs that are easy to find are going to be done by robots, honestly, and algorithms in the not too distant future. And if we want to educate our kids to be able to thrive in the world that is coming, we need to teach them how to create a customer. That needs to be the job of the education system, in my opinion. 1993, when I started my own company, the company's called XPLANE, and we focus on explaining things, helping people explain things. Anything that's complex or complicated or potentially confusing. And entrepreneurship can be that, business can be that. I went to art school originally, came out of art school, became what I would call an infographer. It's not really a word for it in English. It's a beautiful word in Spanish, infografista, but it's someone who does infographics, someone who does visual explanations. I've always been really fascinated by why and how people understand things, and what the role of understanding. I mean, you can't do anything unless you understand something. And from that, I created a company that does that, and I've written several books. I've written a book called Gamestorming, which is about techniques for collaborative thinking and visual thinking together visually. I wrote a book called The Connected Company, which is all about, the different forms of organizations that are emerging in the 21st century, like Amazon, that are completely different than what has been here before. And I just finished a book called Liminal Thinking about how to create change in your life by changing the way you think. Everybody has something in their life they want to change. But you can't change the past. Everybody knows that. And you can't change the future because the future doesn't exist yet. The only place and time that you can create change is in the now, in the moment. And in order to change something in the moment, you actually need to be in the moment. And the thing that's stopping you from creating the change that you want to have in your life is autopilot. You're on autopilot, everyone else around you is on autopilot, we're all running through our day on autopilot, not really paying attention to what's going on in the moment. We've got our head in our to-do list and our other things that we're thinking about. We spend our time and our mental energy worrying about the past, or worrying about the future, or reliving events in the past and not being in the moment. If you truly want to create change in your life, the way to do it is to turn off your autopilot so it brings you back to the moment and you can focus on what's happening here and now. And I think what all of these things have in common, the visualization, the exploration of new business models, the idea of exploration of new different ways of working and thinking, are all driven by curiosity and a desire to understand the world. I've always been a very curious person, very interested in exploring and understanding the world, and also sharing what I've learned with others. And because my process of learning is to visualize things, to draw pictures and diagrams and make things visual and to simplify them, it actually turns out that when I go through a learning process, I generate automatically, as byproduct of my learning, I generate materials that help other people learn more quickly. Because I think it's because if I can draw a picture, I can understand something. And if I can draw a picture that I can understand, then probably just about anybody can understand it. And it takes a lot of work for me to understand things because I'm a little slow. But once I have understood something, I've usually made a picture and can make a very simple description of it that makes it easier for other people to learn really fast. People have, in business especially, in business and life, in nonprofit situations, people have all kinds of things that are difficult or problematic or hard to explain, potentially confusing, complicated. And by representing them visually, by making a visual picture, you can explain things a lot more rapidly, and you can help more people understand. Just imagine if you see a picture that describes something, how much easier it is. The picture's worth 1,000 words, right? So I had this, it was kind of a not unusual entrepreneur problem. I had a solution in search of a problem. So I had to find the business value proposition, and we didn't have value proposition canvases in those days. We didn't have business model canvases. We just had kind of wing it and figure it out, and that's what I did. Conversation after conversation after conversation, trying to get meetings with people and ask them. I just kept asking, what do you need to explain? Do you have something you need to explain? And eventually figured out technology is an area where there's a lot of explaining to do. Financial services is an area where there's a lot of explaining to do. Government is a huge area where there's a lot of explaining to do. And it's been a really fun ride. And one of the things that is difficult about a creative person who becomes a boss is that when you're a creative person and you're not anybody's boss, you can walk around throwing out crazy creative ideas all the time, and you get ignored by people, and you kind of get used to it, and you throw out those ideas, you think out loud, and you have friends who are comfortable with that and they like that. But once you've started a company and you have employees, and you start throwing out crazy ideas, people perceive that as orders. They perceive, even if you don't intend it that way, people perceive that as, oh shit, here comes Crazy Dave again. Here, he's going to throw out some idea and I'm going to have to do it. And so it was I don't know if you'd call this a failure or a tragedy. To me, it was a tragedy when I had to suddenly shut up, keep my enthusiasm to myself, stop sharing ideas that I was excited about because other people, it was hurtful. For me to even share a creative idea was a harmful thing. And I had to learn about that. And it's partly but it hurt me to feel like I couldn't express these ideas. And so I learned to keep them to myself. This is sort of a tragedy. I'll tell you a story about design thinking. I was privileged to be invited to speak to a group of about 30 CIOs, Chief Information Officers of global corporations. And I was talking to them about my company, XPLANE, and the work that we do with our clients and how we help them communicate complex ideas and so forth. And one of the CIOs raised his hand, and I said, yes. And he said, is this like design thinking? And I said, yeah, it is design thinking. And I gave him my description of what I think design thinking is, which is, in my view, design thinking is a way for groups of people who don't think of themselves as designers, to take the activities that designers do, the activities that they do to make and design and create things, and create a shared kind of brain where they can do those activities. They can act and think like designers as a group, and they can create things. And I said, does that jive with your definition? And he said, he didn't look at me, he looked around, he looked at his peers, and he said, design thinking is something that comes out of Stanford, and if you want design thinking, you go to IDEO, which is a company that owns this phrase in the minds of senior executives in the world. And I thought, and basically his message to his peers was, don't listen to this poser. If you really want to learn about design thinking, this is not the guy to be talking to or listening to, because it comes from IDEO and Stanford. Is he from IDEO? Is he from Stanford? No. So that was when I stopped using the word design thinking, honestly. They have so many things that they're trying to process that they use very simple labels and they attach them to things in their brain. And if you are trying to get them to see something new, don't use a label that they already think they know. You need a new label. That's why my new book is called Liminal Thinking, because I couldn't call it something. I needed a label I had that CIO in mind as my audience, and I had to have a label that he would look at and say, oh, I don't think I've heard of that. I don't know what that is. Should I have heard of that? Is this something? And the first time he hears it, it probably won't be. He won't say that. But if he hears it 3 times from his peers or in various places, the third time he hears it, he'll probably be saying, is that something I need to know? Is that something I need to hear about? So I think there's more a thing about labels to me, is that labels are useful because they can help generate a movement, they can help generate a real solid thing, but you want to be careful about what those labels are attached to and whether using those labels is serving you or not. This whole idea of how we label things and how we describe things, I think, is very, very wrapped up in the idea of entrepreneurship and change and disruption. I was working with the Auto ID Center. These were the people who invented the RFID technology. So the things that we now see in stores where this kind of managing inventory and stuff. And they were trying to describe this radio frequency identification tags to people, and they were having a hell of a difficult time. And what they finally figured out to make it work for people was to say, well, it's the next generation of the barcode. Well, it has nothing to do, it's almost nothing from a technology standpoint that RFID has in common with the barcode, except for the fact that it's used in retail and merchandise, and it's used to track goods and give them unique identifiers. So in order to find, this is a challenge with a lot of new technologies. You have to find a label that makes sense not to you as the inventor, but to the person who's going to be buying it. And in this case, what the Walmarts and the Gillettes of the world needed to hear was, oh, well, how does it fit into my paradigm? Well, it's the next generation of the barcode. For me, invention is bringing something new into the world, something that maybe the world hasn't seen before. It's innovation when somebody sees value in that, when somebody actually wants to buy it, and Segway is, I guess, an invention. It's to some degree an innovation. I just saw one out there, that it hasn't really taken off though, like the car. So it's probably somewhere between invention and innovation. Invention is an interesting curiosity, and innovation is something that is useful and valued by people. Amazon is a totally fascinating company to me. I think that Jeff Bezos is the Henry Ford of our time. He's the person in the 21st century that is doing to business what Henry Ford did in the 20th century, which is completely reimagining it based on the technology and the systems that are available at the time. What was available in Henry Ford's time, he put together things, and he didn't invent them all, but he pulled, I think, the idea of assembly line from a butcher shop and some other interchangeable parts and regular hour work days and timesheets and all that stuff that he put together became the blueprint for the entire 20th century organization. Now we have the internet, we have technologies that are incredibly, that are digital, that are incredibly transformational. And what Amazon has done, to your point, has, and I think better than any other company and more holistically than any other company, has rethought the idea of business from scratch around the internet and the way that the internet works. You can, to your point, what you were saying earlier, you can have whatever you want whenever you want now, and Amazon is doing its best to make sure they can give that to you, and for as cheap as you want, as cheap as you can get it. And it's pretty addictive, to your point. And I think that I wrote a whole book trying to deconstruct this new way of understanding business, which is called The Connected Company. And I didn't say this explicitly in the book, but it's 90% about Amazon, really how Amazon has changed the world. And I think that I started investing in Amazon in 2001, which is a good time to start doing that. And so I've been a long time customer. Even at that time, I had been a customer for many years. And what happened at that moment was Walmart decided they were going to start selling stuff online in 2001. And investors panicked. Amazon investors panicked. Oh no, here comes Walmart. And I just looked at my relationship with Amazon, and they, even at that time in 2001, I had all my reviews. They knew what my favorite things are. They knew my address. I could buy with one click. They knew me. There was nothing that was going to pull me away from Amazon and make me go over to a Walmart website to start buying stuff. I knew that. It was very obvious to me. And so I took all the savings that I had at the time and I put them into Walmart stock. And Amazon stock. I bought Amazon stock with it. And I've continued to invest in Amazon over the years, and Amazon is, I think, probably one of the best possible investments in technology today, because Jeff Bezos and his team have created a incredibly difficult to kill business model. It's like algae or weeds. It's invasive. It's an invasive species, and it is completely disrupting the 20th century businesses in the same way that the modern industrial organization disrupted the farming industry. I mean, it wasn't that long ago, maybe 150 years ago or so, that 70 or 80% of the population in the United States was farmers. We're farmers, working on farms. And the industrial age completely disrupted that. And we're in the process right now of seeing a new kind of disruption where a lot of our jobs are going to be done by robots. What's going to be the jobs of the future, the businesses of the future, are going to be businesses that are focused on other things and organized in very different ways. I think Amazon's the pioneer for that, and I think the poster child for me to look at. And how do you do that? The perfect day for me, there are two, and it's like a pattern. The tide goes in, the tide goes out. The tide coming in is being introverted, being by myself, thinking, having time to myself to really process and think about things, and maybe reading, writing, drawing, painting, sometimes solitary, thoughtful activities. And when the tide goes out, it's the extrovert in me. It's being among my peers, being in a community of creative people, inventors, entrepreneurs, speakers, people who are authors, interesting people who are working on projects that they're excited about. And for me, the oscillation between the tide coming in and the tide going out are what I really enjoy. If it gets out of balance, then I start saying no to speaking requests, or I start saying yes to them. So luckily, I get enough of them that I can kind of monitor. So if let's say it starts to get where I'm spending too much time by myself, I start lowering my rates for speaking. If I start spending too much time on the road, then I start raising the rates. So it's kind of like supply and demand kind of thing. Supply and demand, and when you are the supply, you can, obviously there's limited supply. It's only so many hours, and I think part of it is I think probably a common thread in all this stuff is it's about how you show up. If you get to a point where you show up and you're not excited to be there, you're not happy to be there, then you need to find a way to dial it back. Because, selling is the transfer of emotion. For people to buy something from you, it has to be something that you're excited about, and you have to have energy and enthusiasm for it. And nobody wants to buy something from somebody who's bored with whatever it is. So that emotion is important, and you have to cultivate it inside yourself. Randy Root he was an entrepreneur and a founder of a company called Root Learning, and I spent a lot of time with him because I could. I was working with him, and he said some very interesting things to me. One of which was the idea that a surgeon, this is his word, a surgeon only makes money when he cuts. And what he meant by that was, if you're a freelance person and you're just working and you're basically selling hours, then you're only able to make money when you're actually working hours. Whereas if you could create an engine, a company can be an engine for creating money. It can be basically like a machine that generates money when you're sleeping. That's one of the goals for creating a business, and that was, I think, one of the things that stuck with me. Surgeon only makes money when he cuts. So try and find a way to create a business that makes money when you don't have to be directly involved with it. So that was one. Another one was, his phrase was, brain surgery is just too difficult. And what he meant by that was, if you're in a business situation, and you have employees and they're just not working out, don't try and turn one person into a different kind of person. Fire them. If it's really, and I learned this as a teacher too, that there are people, some students learn quickly, some pick up things quickly, some students learn more slowly, some are just not trying. And they could learn if they wanted to. And as a teacher, you can, or a boss, you can spend a lot of time on people who are just not putting in the effort or energy and trying to turn those people around, when it might be easier just to let them go, give them an F, flunk them out, and focus on the people that you can help. Because let's say you have 20 people in your organization. If you spend 80% of your time on a couple of people who are problem people, you're really not doing a service to the other 18 who are hardworking, and you can help accelerate those people. So I think that's something that's always stuck with me, the idea that brain surgery is just too difficult, and don't spend an inordinate amount of time. If you're putting some effort in and people are not getting there, or they're not turning around, cut them loose and focus on the people that you can get results with. It might sound a little ruthless, but it's actually been very useful to me. Here's what to think about, and here's what to do as an entrepreneur. Welcome, hatchling entrepreneur. Welcome to the world. Here's what I have to tell you. Don't become overly attached to a goal, a purpose that you're not excited about. Don't run yourself ragged with this idea that you're going to have a payout, you're going to make money in the future. Find something that you can enjoy doing every day. So you're enjoying the journey. You may it's good to have a goal that you're shooting for, but if you don't enjoy it, if you're not enjoying it every day, you'll never make it to the top of that mountain. You just won't make it. So find something you can really be thrilled about and enjoy every day. And if you make it, great. And if you don't, you had a great time anyway. So you really can't lose. Where you can lose is if you give up your life and you murder yourself in a way, or you murder your soul. You postpone the joy for some future payday that may or may not happen. That's a horrible way to spend your life, and the payday may not happen anyway. So find that joy inside yourself, and find a way to really be excited and joyful every day. And the nice thing about that is you can't help but learn. If you have something you love that much, you're going to get better at it. You're going to get great at it. You have a chance to become the best in the world at it. And that's my advice to you, Ashley. Hi, my name is Dave. I'm an artist and an entrepreneur.